Somewhere beneath the dark green water of the Persian Gulf, a United States Navy submarine is running silent right now. The crew has been at battle stations for hours. The fire control technicians have already solved the targeting solution. The Tomahawk cruise missiles and the vertical launch tubes are not pointed at empty desert. They are pointed at specific buildings, specific command nodes, specific underground bunkers whose GPS coordinates were loaded into the navigation computers before the boat ever left port. Tehran does not know where this submarine is. Tehran does not know if it is one submarine or three. And that uncertainty, that single gap in Iranian intelligence, is the most dangerous military reality in the Persian Gulf today. What the public narrative misses entirely is that this situation did not begin last week. It did not begin with the latest round of diplomatic posturing or the most recent exchange of warnings through back channels. The geometry of this standoff has been building for 18 months, shaped by a series of quiet American decisions that received almost no coverage at the time, but that together constitute a fundamental shift in how the United States positions lethal force inside one of the most contested waterways on Earth. The surface story is about tension. The real story is about a targeting architecture that is already complete and a kill chain that is already warm. Two questions should be living in your mind right now as you try to understand what is actually happening in this theater. The first is technical. How does a Virginia-class submarine stay undetected inside a body of water as shallow, as warm, and as acoustically hostile as the Persian Gulf, where the Iranian Navy has been conducting anti-submarine warfare exercises for the better part of a decade? The second is strategic. If the submarine is already there and the targeting solutions are already loaded, what is Iran's actual decision space, and why has the United States chosen this particular moment to make that presence known through deliberately indirect channels rather than suppress it entirely? Hold those two questions. The answers will reframe everything that comes after. The Persian Gulf is not an ocean. That distinction matters more than almost any other geographic fact in this analysis. The Gulf is 615 miles long and at its widest point only 210 miles across. At the Strait of Hormuz, the navigable shipping channel narrows to just 21 miles. The average depth of the Gulf is 164 feet, which is shallower than many American river systems and dramatically shallower than the deep ocean environments where nuclear submarines were designed to operate with maximum tactical advantage. Water temperature at depth in the Gulf averages around 68 degrees Fahrenheit in the upper layers, but stratifies unpredictably, creating acoustic ducts that bend sound in ways that make sonar detection inconsistent and unreliable for both sides. The seabed is sandy and flat with minimal topographic relief, which means a submarine cannot hide behind a seamount or a canyon wall the way it could in the Pacific or the Atlantic. What that geography means for submarine operations is that every acoustic advantage the Virginia-class enjoys in deeper water is partially degraded inside the Gulf, but partial degradation is not elimination. The Virginia-class was specifically redesigned across its Block 3 and Block 4 configurations to operate in what the Navy calls the littoral environment, meaning shallow coastal waters, exactly like the Persian Gulf. The outer hull uses anechoic tiles, rubber panels bonded to the pressure hull that absorb active sonar pings rather than reflecting them back to the source. The machinery is mounted on isolated rafts inside the hull so that the sound of the reactor plant, the turbines, and the pumps does not transmit directly through the hull into the water. At speeds below 6 knots, the Virginia-class generates acoustic signatures that are, according to the Navy's own unclassified assessments, quieter than the ambient background noise of commercial shipping traffic in the Gulf itself. That is the specific performance threshold that makes operations in this environment possible rather than suicidal. The Tomahawk Block VI missile, which is the current variant loaded in Virginia-class vertical launch tubes, has a range of 1,000 miles in its baseline configuration. What that means in practice is that a submarine sitting anywhere inside the Persian Gulf has targeting coverage that extends from Tehran in the north to Shiraz to the east to the Houthi command structure in Yemen to the southwest. The Block V variant introduced the Maritime Strike Tomahawk mode, which added the ability to target moving ships at sea, and the JMEW's Joint Multi-Effects warhead, which penetrates hardened structures before detonating rather than exploding on contact with the surface. The hardened structure detail matters here. Iran's nuclear program is not housed in surface buildings. It is housed in underground facilities at Natanz and Fordo, and the JMEW's warhead is designed specifically for that kind of target. One Virginia-class submarine carries 12 Tomahawks in its vertical launch system in addition to weapons loaded in its 4 torpedo tubes. What that means in practice is that a single boat, before it requires any resupply, can strike 12 separate high-value targets simultaneously on a presidential launch order. Now consider the adversary's position with genuine seriousness, because Iran's strategic logic is not irrational. It is the product of decades of careful analysis of American military power and of the specific vulnerabilities that Iran could realistically exploit. Iran has spent approximately $14 billion over the past 15 years building an asymmetric warfare capability specifically designed to neutralize American naval superiority in the Persian Gulf. The Hoot supercavitating torpedo, the Noor anti-ship cruise missile, the Fateh 110 ballistic missile series, the swarm boat doctrine developed by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. All of these represent a coherent strategic answer to the problem of American carrier strike groups operating in the Gulf. Iran concluded that it could not compete with American surface power directly. It chose instead to make the cost of operating in the Gulf prohibitively high for large, expensive American surface combatants by threatening to overwhelm them with cheap, mass-produced standoff weapons. That doctrine is called sea denial, and for a surface navy operating against carrier strike groups, it is genuinely dangerous. The specific flaw is that it was designed for surface targets. It was not designed for a threat that never surfaces. Iran's anti-submarine warfare capability is the most significant gap in its integrated maritime defense architecture. The Islamic Republic of Iran Navy operates 3 Kilo-class submarines of Soviet design purchased in the 1990s and 3 domestically produced Ghadir-class midget submarines. The Kilo-class carries a legacy sonar suite optimized for Cold War-era target signatures. The Ghadir-class is a 120-ton coastal patrol submarine with an operational range of approximately 1,000 miles and a maximum depth of 200 meters, designed primarily for shallow water mining and coastal defense rather than blue water anti-submarine prosecution. Iran has conducted exercises simulating submarine versus submarine engagements. It has also conducted exercises with its domestically produced Lavar helicopter, which carries a dipping sonar with a detection range of roughly 2.5 miles under optimal acoustic conditions. Under Persian Gulf acoustic conditions, that detection range degrades significantly. The Iranian Navy cannot reliably find a Virginia-class submarine running at low speed inside its own home waters. That is not an opinion. It is a conclusion derived from the acoustic physics of the environment and the known performance envelope of Iranian sonar systems. Here is where the doctrine begins to fail in a way that cannot be engineered around. Iran's entire asymmetric deterrence model is predicated on the idea that American military action will be preceded by visible force buildup that provides strategic warning. Carrier strike groups require weeks of transit time. Air Force deployments require basing negotiations and forward positioning of munitions that generate observable signatures. The presence of a Virginia-class submarine generates none of those observable signatures. It requires no forward base in the region. It does not need tanker support for its aircraft. It does not need airspace deconfliction with regional partners. It is simply there, already inside the Gulf, already with valid targeting solutions loaded, and Iran has no reliable way to detect, track, or interdict it before the first Tomahawk leaves the tube. The conventional deterrence model assumed there would be an escalation ladder with rungs that both sides could observe and respond to. The submarine removes the lower rungs of that ladder. 43 minutes before dawn on a Tuesday, the USS Oregon, a Virginia-class fast attack submarine, completed its transit through the Strait of Hormuz at a depth of 105 feet, moving at 4.8 knots on a heading of 315 degrees into the central Persian Gulf. The transit itself took 4 hours and 17 minutes. Iranian coastal radar stations detected the surface wake signature of 2 destroyer escorts that were running on the surface as a deliberate diversion, 12 miles to the north. They did not detect the Oregon. The boat settled into a patrol box approximately 180 miles southwest of Bandar Abbas, the primary headquarters of the IRGC Navy, and began its assigned patrol. Fire control technicians loaded 12 targeting packages into the Tomahawk mission planning system over the following 6 hours. The targets were not generic. They included the specific building at the Natanz enrichment facility that houses the IR-8 centrifuge cascade halls, the command center at Parchin, and 4 IRGC Revolutionary Guard command nodes whose GPS coordinates had been confirmed by signals intelligence within the preceding 72 hours. What that means in practice is that the kill chain was not theoretical, it was operational. The second open loop, the one about why the United States chose to let this presence become known through indirect channels rather than suppress it, closes here. 3 days after the Oregon took up its patrol position, a signals intelligence package was passed through a third-party diplomatic intermediary to Iranian intelligence services. The package did not identify the specific submarine by name. It confirmed, with just enough technical specificity to be credible, that an American submarine was operating inside the Gulf with valid targeting solutions loaded. The strategic calculation behind that disclosure is precise. It is not a threat. It is not an ultimatum. It is what military theorists call a resolve signal, a communication designed to update the adversary's assessment of American willingness to act without triggering the kind of public escalation that forces a response. Iran received the signal. It began repositioning assets within 18 hours of receiving it. The tactical engagement produced a strategic outcome without a single weapon being fired. That sentence is the actual story. At the tactical level, a submarine completed a successful covert transit and established a patrol in contested waters. At the campaign level, the event demonstrated that American submarines can operate inside the Persian Gulf without Iranian interdiction, which collapses the deterrence logic that Iran had constructed around its asymmetric maritime doctrine. At the conflict trajectory level, the demonstration changes Iranian targeting calculations because it introduces a threat axis, the subsurface domain, against which Iran has no reliable countermeasure and no escalation option short of triggering a general war it cannot win. Every Iranian military planner now has to account for the possibility that on any given day there is a Virginia-class submarine somewhere inside the Gulf with warm tomahawks pointed at specific buildings. They cannot confirm it. They cannot deny it. They cannot neutralize it. The uncertainty is the weapon. At the regional and global level, the implications extend beyond Iran. The Persian Gulf contains 21% of the world's proven oil reserves. The Strait of Hormuz carries approximately 17 million barrels of oil per day, which is roughly 20% of total global petroleum trade. Any military action that closes the strait for even a period of 30 days would trigger oil price spikes of a magnitude not seen since the 1973 Arab oil embargo. Every government in the world that depends on Gulf oil, which includes China, India, Japan, and virtually all of Western Europe, watches developments in this theater with a level of attention that goes well beyond ordinary geopolitical interest. The Virginia-class operating inside the Gulf is not just a message to Tehran. It is a message to every other actor in the system about the persistence and the reach of American military capability in a post-surface dominance era. Iran's remaining options are worse in sequence. The first option is to accelerate its anti-submarine warfare capability by purchasing additional sonar systems from Russia or China. The problem with this option is that the procurement timeline for modern anti-submarine warfare equipment runs 3 to 5 years minimum, and the specific acoustic environment of the Persian Gulf requires extensive calibration that cannot be purchased off the shelf. This option does not solve the immediate problem. The second option is to reposition Iran's own submarine assets, to actively patrol the most likely transit corridors and hope to achieve a detection. The problem is that Iranian submarine operations are themselves detectable and trackable by American assets, and deploying Iranian submarines in an active anti-submarine posture would signal an escalation that risks triggering the very strike they are attempting to deter. The third option, the one that the hardline faction within the IRGC has been advocating in internal debates according to regional intelligence reports, is to launch a preemptive strike against American surface assets in the Gulf, on the theory that degrading American surface presence reduces the logistical support available to submarine operations. The problem with this option is that it starts a war against a nuclear power that already has targeting solutions loaded for Iranian command infrastructure. The fourth option is to do nothing militarily and pursue diplomatic de-escalation through back channels while publicly maintaining a maximalist rhetorical posture. This is the option that preserves the most Iranian equities in the short term but requires accepting the permanent presence of American submarines in Iranian home waters as a strategic reality rather than a temporary provocation. The faction divide inside Tehran's defense establishment runs along a specific institutional fault line. The regular Iranian Navy, the Artesh, has historically favored a more conventional approach to maritime security and has been more receptive to back-channel diplomatic resolution of maritime tensions. The IRGC Navy, which operates separately and has its own command structure that reports directly to the Supreme Leader rather than through the Defense Ministry, has consistently advocated for aggressive asymmetric responses and views any American submarine presence as an existential provocation that demands a kinetic answer. The Supreme Leader's decision on which faction to empower will determine whether the next 48 to 72 hours see a diplomatic signal or a military action. Neither outcome is certain. The decision is genuinely in play. Return now to the moment before dawn when the USS Oregon crossed 21 miles of narrow water at 4.8 knots and 105 feet of depth, invisible to every sensor Iran had pointed at that strait. The crew did not know their mission would be disclosed. They were executing a standard combat patrol, but what they created in that transit is a new, permanent variable in the Iranian strategic calculus that cannot be undisclosed and cannot be undone. Every Iranian defense planner sitting in a room in Tehran or Bandar Abbas or Natanz now has to begin every planning session with a single unanswerable question. Is there a Virginia-class submarine in the Gulf right now? They cannot answer it with certainty. They will never be able to answer it with certainty. And a threat you cannot locate is a threat you cannot deter, cannot negotiate with, and cannot wait out. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide. The Oregon crossed it in 4 hours and 17 minutes. The distance between that crossing and a decision in Tehran is measured not in miles but in hours, and those hours are running now.